Hello, beautiful ladies. Welcome back to another Whammon Hour. And tonight, in the spirit of trying things differently, we've got lots of women joining, and I want to tackle a lot of topics. We're going to do this efficiently. So, very efficiently, I'm going to say the names of the guests, and you're going to say whatever greeting you like, whatever salutation comes to mind, and then we're going to move on. Tasha, good to see you.
All right. How are you?
None of that. No one cares how I am.
Okay.
Haven Woods, welcome.
Howdy.
Hi. And without further ado, let's get into the topics. So I picked the topic for today. If there's a super chat topic we were supposed to tackle, I forgot what it was. So maybe we'll get around to it. But first of all, I was at the National Conservatism Conference last Monday, and there was a lot of interesting ideas going around, lots of interesting people who I talked to. And one of the things that just came to mind, one of the speeches that I watched, was Danny Kruger, who's an MP for, I think, Wiltshire, who was there giving a speech. And in his speech, I wrote down what he said. I went back and listened to it. You can listen to the speech on YouTube, by the way. Go to National Conservatism's channel. And what he said was talking about COVID countermeasures. He was sort of owning up to the mistakes that the government at the time, the Conservative government, made during that time. And he said at first it was about duty, about putting the old and the frail first for once, and just protecting our neighbours, staying at home, to putting aside commercial interests and making money and line go up to protect each other. But then he said it became about the suppression of free speech, and I can't read my own writing, and suppressing dissent, closing schools and churches, so that not even a solitary priest could give Sunday communion to himself alone in a church. And he went on to say that the Magna Carta, the first line in Magna Carta, for non-English people, that's like our constitution. We'd actually have a constitution. We did it first, before Americans did it. Ours is called Magna Carta, and the first line of the Magna Carta says, "The church in England shall be free." But when COVID started, it didn't matter. Like, Magna Carta, our sort of founding legal text, didn't matter during the COVID pandemic. And I will say that my YouTube channel has a community strike on it at the moment because of a guest that I had who was undermining the severity of COVID according to the principles put out by YouTube. So I just want to put out here, none of my guests are going to disagree with this, because if they do, they will be booted immediately for getting me in trouble. We are not undermining the severity of COVID. We are not questioning the validity, the efficacy of vaccines, or of the we're not undermining the official narrative. Okay, tonight what we're going to be doing is talking about the countermeasures that were taken initially, especially the lockdowns, that I believe, in my opinion, went on for way too long. They were extremely restrictive on freedom, on religious freedom, on freedom of speech, of just the freedom of the country, of people to live normal lives. I believe, it went on for so long is the thing. Well, on and again, off again precautions. And I really don't think we can let politicians off the hook, and let the media off the hook, or let each other off the hook for everything that we did, everything that we all took part in. I think of it now as a kind of temporary madness that we lived through. So welcome, Birdie. Thanks for joining us. We can't hear you. I don't know if you're speaking. Is it just me? I can't hear anyone.
I can't hear Birdie either.
I can hear you, Havenwoods. Since you spoke up. Havenwoods, did you have anything to say to my... That was a very long tirade, I appreciate, so do chip in.
Yeah, I will respect the limit of not getting your channel destroyed. I think the thing I found interesting, I was working for the civil service at the time, and from the January of 2020, we had some colleagues who are slightly more senior than me in the government communications service were going to kind of cross-governmental meetings about the pandemic and about COVID because the news was kind of coming out of China. People were starting to get a bit worried. And essentially, the message we got given was that kind of filtered down to sort of the level I was at the time was essentially, we don't have the data yet. We don't really know what this is. But the goal of sort of comms right now is to scare people so that eventually, if we do need to do anything drastic, people will fall in line. And that was the kind of underlying message that we got was people need to be made frightened of what this is and the unknown and what it might be. Kind of almost before we knew how severe it was. And so that was kind of the tone for a lot of the things we did. And essentially it suddenly became kind of everything we were doing, all the other kind of projects we had, became slightly secondary to this message of like, whatever else you're doing, make sure you bang the drum. This is a thing to be very fearful of. And whether or not that was justified, I will not say on this channel.
Okay, Tasha?
Just checking. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're all good, buddy.
Okay,
Any
we're
thoughts so far?
To start, sorry for being late. Yeah, no, I heard what you were briefly saying to begin with, Poe. Havenwoods, I do apologise. I was dipping in and out of that. It's a bit chaotic this end at the moment. Yeah, no, I completely agree in terms of, it was very, very chaotic. There was a lot of different views going around, a lot of different laws as well, which I'm sure we'll pick up on later. But I don't think anybody really knew what was going on. I worked throughout the whole thing, so I didn't really, I would kind of had a different set of laws compared to my mum, for instance. So it was very, very confusing for everybody, I think, because everybody was being told something different. There didn't seem to be one set of rules. It seemed to be one rule for one and one rule for another.
Tasha?
Yeah, I mean, I think the confusion aspect is, we all felt that right at the beginning. And I think from my point of view, right at the beginning, we didn't really know what was going on. We knew that there was something that seemed bad, and we were seeing all these images coming over from China that looked really worrying. But we kind of ignored it to begin with. And then I remember when it started drifting over, and then there was all the stuff happening in Italy. And that's when it really ramped up. And I'm kind of thinking whether the tail's wagging the dog in terms of the government starting out with this sort of fear thing because they were genuinely not sure and they didn't know what it was. But then it kind of got away, it turned into a runaway train almost. And then the media started kind of getting involved. And then a load of people that I knew lost their minds and were shouting at people online. And then neighbours were shouting at neighbours, and everyone kind of got sort of whipped up with this whole thing. And I feel like the government almost, I felt like Boris, for all his faults, I just got the feeling that he was reluctant to really kind of clamp everything down at first. It felt like that. And it felt like the government were nervous about the media and then the people online who were the most sort of like crazed fanatics, if you like. I mean, I had friends who were just shouting at everybody and talking about going to a supermarket and a woman didn't have a mask on and she was screaming at the woman. And, I was just thinking, I thought this was a sane human being here. But so I just, it kind of felt like a runaway train. And
it didn't. It was like a runaway train in the sense that it started off very slow. Like, if anything, it didn't start soon enough because the government was really nervous about closing the border and stopping planes coming in from East Asia and from China, where it was still going on, like weeks after we understood that there was a virus and there was already cases in England. There were still flights landing, and because there was no measures like anywhere on Earth like China was clamping down on it, but nowhere in Europe or in the Americas or in the sort of developed Western world was taking these measures on. And so I think the government started off being very nervous. Like everyone was like looking around, waiting for someone else to move first. And then Italy, do you remember, locked down before anyone? And then it was like when Italy tried it and it started working, that's when everyone else in Europe and then America and everyone else kind of got permission to do it because the Italians had done it and because the people were obeying the rules and it was slowing the spread. Like everyone else got like the confidence to actually just jump in and do it.
I do think, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me here, in terms of, it was, as we've all said, definitely a runaway train. And I think that is down to the fact that we've never come across anything like this before. So someone's cat pitching in.
Sorry, it's Gatsby. He needs
Thanks
a
for the
cameo.
opinion.
We've got a man on Women's Hour. It's the cat.
I've completely lost train of thought now. No, so it was definitely a runaway train because it's, as I've just said, it was something that we've never encountered before. So I do think that we all kind of, especially the government who we were waiting on to tell us something, it was almost like you say, Poe, they were waiting on somebody else to take the first move because they had no idea what this was going to spiral into, what real dangers we were actually in. I don't think they actually knew fully what we were up against, but I do think that kind of thought process continued throughout the whole situation, throughout the whole couple of years. And I definitely saw it at my workplace. I mean, I don't mind saying it, I did work at a COVID site at one point, and it was just as confusing for us as staff as it was for the public, because we were being told one thing by the government and then something else by the health board. And for some reason, they could not agree on what they wanted us to do and what information they wanted us to pass on to the public. And we were being fed new information every week for at least 6 to 8 months. And it was incredibly stressful for us because, people were panicking because they didn't know what to do. But at the same time, I don't think the government knew what to do. They had no idea how to handle this situation because it had never happened before. I think all the countries were kind of waiting for each one to take the next move and thinking, well, let's see if their strategy works. Let's see if their strategy works. And everything just kind of got mixed up, and we had kind of parts from every single person and a lot of people pitching in their ideas to try and combat whatever the hell was going on.
I think there was another issue as well, which was that the sort of runaway train thing. Once the sort of media and the national discourse and all the kind of angry people yelling at the maskless in supermarkets had kind of been kicked into gear, suddenly it was almost impossible to turn that tap back off. And I think that was sort of part of the problem, was globally, every government was kind of going, if they were reconsidering it, if they were looking at their kind of, the data and what's actually happening and kind of the global context, it was like, actually, if we try and roll it back now, we kind of can't put this genie back in the bottle.
Yeah.
And it was that sort of, it was the interesting thing for me of just, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to sort of express this without necessarily stepping over the boundary of questioning the narrative.
The government took it on themselves to be responsible for every single person who died or got sick from this one particular illness, taking that as a priority over every other indicator of health or happiness or well-being of the nation. This became priority.
Flu cases went through the floor at the same time. Funny that.
Yeah,
amazing.
They did.
No
And one
question
thing
about
I
that
picked
was-
up on what you said, Havenwoods, which was at the time to what you were saying, Poe, is the data. And I worked 2 jobs during the whole incident, should we call it? And the first one that I was already in was at an autistic school, which I've mentioned before. And we had to stay open because of the type of students we had. We were a special needs school. We had to stay open. And the data we were being fed was terrifying, basically. And it got to a point we were in full hazmat suits, and we were basically made to be scared of each other. It was very weird. But then when I left that job because I was in the middle of moving out at the time, which was not very useful. I bought a house, so I was very terrible timing. And that's when I started at the COVID site. And the data we were given there was completely different to what the public was being fed. It wasn't necessarily true data. And this is where it gets all very sort of mixed up, and there's a major grey area, especially when it comes to the amount of people who were actually infected, the amount of people who actually died, etc., etc. Because of the nature of the work I did, unfortunately, when we were doing what they called live tests, so we had the infected COVID tests on site with us. I did not catch COVID once from this site, but what was very annoying was that we were never told how many of those tests actually came back as positive. We were never told the numbers that we were getting from our site. Now, we were seeing 200-300 people a day. We were passing quite a lot of people through our site, and there were only 10 of us working there. So it was very chaotic, but the numbers just didn't correlate with what we were seeing. So we instantly knew that there was something kind of backhanded almost going on, because we were jotting down, because it got to a point where you kind of had an eye for these things. If somebody walked in, we knew whether or not they had COVID or if they didn't. It was as simple as that. And we kind of make a mental note of how many people we saw that day, and by the end of the week we had a rough number. Of those numbers, because we weren't the only site to do it, we kind of teamed up with quite a lot of other sites over Cornwall, and they were doing the same. And the numbers we had were not, granted it's not an accurate number, but it was nowhere near, we're talking thousands of difference in numbers between what the government were telling us and what we actually saw. And ours was the lower number. So I do think it was very much a scare tactic. I do think a lot of what they were saying was a scare tactic. I don't necessarily think it was a bad thing, but it definitely did spiral out of control. It was a case of, we'll use the scare tactic to try and get the public under control, but it didn't work, I don't think, because people just panicked. As we know, people started doing really silly things, and as Tasha was saying, people started yelling at each other. People started being horrible and scared of each other because that's what they were told to do. It was very weird.
We now know that there was a relatively low risk from being outside, and actually the vitamin D that you get from the sunshine was a pretty good mitigating factor to the severity of the illness. And if we'd known that, they would have been encouraging people to go out instead of limiting us to like 1 hour a day. Do you remember that? Like at first, when you're only allowed to go out to walk or to run or to cycle for an hour and go to buy sort of essential items, when really there was never any risk from being outside. And in fact, being outside would have been great for all our health.
Just to put my tinfoil hat on, I don't think they would have told us to do that, even if they had the data at the time. Because, so for example, the sort of, I have a sort of family friend who's involved in SAGE, and for the longest time, they didn't have anyone with a specialism in immunology on the board that was specifically looking at, how to deal with a pandemic. They just had that guy with his endless models who'd been proven to be flexible previously. And it's things like they when they did have people with the relevant scientific experience on the boards, they still didn't listen to them. So I think it was very much a case of, they had all the data, they had all the information, they would have been able to see some of that, but because other motivating factors, I think they chose not to. What was it? There was the thing that came out recently of essentially them saying, "Oh, well, we've got some really positive figures and we've got some really negative figures. Let's focus on the negative stuff because the media want to hear about it." And it was because the media were kind of playing into and sucked into that kind of fear zone.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think people in general public did lean into that as well, because even at the site we had the general public saying, oh, how many have you got today, as kind of a joke, the locals walking past getting their pint of milk every day, and it got to a point where it's like, why are you asking about the bad stuff? Not, oh, how's your day been? Oh, I hope you didn't have many today. It was almost
that's
like
all
a
we've got to
game.
talk about. With nothing
Yeah.
happening, like nobody's
It was-
going
it was
out, no
all-
one's doing
yeah,
anything.
It was all the bad things, and it was always, oh, have you caught COVID yet? And I'm like, one, morbid, and two, like, why would you ask somebody that? And it was very much a depressing scene in terms of just the media covering all the depressing stats and not anything. Oh, by the way, you know, this many people recovered, or you know, this many people didn't have COVID. It was always the bad numbers, and it was scaremongering. It was just a case of, you know, this is how we're going to control you, because if we scare you into thinking it's all bad, whereas obviously the ones who are in the sector knew otherwise. I mean, we had one of the guys from the health board. He used to come down every week, and he would, you know, we could see it in his face. He was so fed up because he would have to tell us all these numbers, and we just looked at him, and he was like, "Yeah, I know, you know, every week." And it, you know, he was incredibly fed up of it. And I mean, I don't know where he is now, but you know, it was one of those things where you kind of saw in his face, and we saw in so many other people's faces, and even my colleagues, that we just wanted some good news, you know. And it was very, very common in a lot of these COVID sites and any sort of, well, any site set up, the COVID vaccination sites, the testing sites, any sort of workplace like that, that the morale was incredibly low. I mean, incredibly low. It was like white wall syndrome, and all we could think about was the bad things. None of us focused on any of the good stuff. It was always, oh, how many numbers have we got? How many traumatized children have we got coming in today? You know, it was horrendous, and the media did not help with that situation.
Like I said, lots of topics tonight. I want to hear from Tasha, and then let's move on.
I think we were on a trajectory since Brexit where I think we had, and Trump. I feel like I'm going off topic, but I don't think I am. I think a lot of people lost their minds then, and the media kind of got swept along with, and possibly people working in governments as well. I mean, I don't want to go too deep into that, but I think that that really sort of sent people off into a kind of madness. And I think that when this thing came along, everything that had happened before it kind of affected the way that this played out as well, in that all the sort of divisiveness and craziness and hysteria, everyone was already primed. So then this came along, and it was almost like, oh my God, this is it. This is, you know, this is the end of the world. And the negativity coming from the media, and the clickbait, and everyone being online, that just got totally magnified tenfold. And then we had the whole BLM thing happening just right at the kind of end of that. So I just think it's a whole continuation of something bigger in terms of mass hysteria and craziness, and it just tapped into that. And I think the government were scared of having any deaths on their hands, because we're in this sort of culture of safetyism. So they just didn't want,
it did feel very much, I think you're completely right, Tash. You've hit the nail on the head there. And I do think, I mean, it was described by a lot of people that I knew as a mini depression, you know, because, you know, mini Great Depression, because as you say, there was nothing to look forward to. You know, the current events that had happened, the previous event, the current event, which, you know, was COVID at the time, and then, as you say, the event that happened afterwards, none of it was anything to lift your spirits. It wasn't anything to look forward to. And, you know, it was a case of how do we get out of this rut? So yeah, the government definitely kind of, you know, how do we get out of this? Let's just, you know, look at other people's choices and go by that. And they, as you say, I think they were scared because they didn't know which way to turn.
And they didn't want it on their hands. They didn't want all those deaths on. You imagine people would have lost. I mean, and the media is clickbait. It's all clickbait now. So it's all negativity. So everything just was primed from that. And I really think it felt like the government were being ruled by the media, and the media were being ruled by people on Twitter. I know that sounds a bit mad, but that's how it seems to me.
No, I think you're exactly
they
right.
were scared. Like, oh my God, all these people are going to die, and it's going to be our fault, and it's going to be terrible. You know.
And I think people in our age are frightened of death in a way that we didn't used to be when people died. When death was more common.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but during that whole period, it was a case of I was scared to catch COVID, not for my own problems, but if I passed it on to somebody else, if I
Yeah.
gave it to my mum and then she, if she passed away because of that, I'd feel like I was to blame.
That was
You know,
actually that was really common at the time. I remember there was so
yeah,
many people who were like, "Oh no, I don't care. Like, whatever. Like, don't worry about me. I'm just worried about everyone else." Like that. That
yeah,
was a
yeah,
really common thing you heard. Is everyone was just worried about. They were worried
Everyone
about other
else.
people, but no, like people who are young and healthy, or even people who weren't young and healthy. Like we had a baby at the time. Our oldest is 3 now, but she was just a baby. And the grandparents just wanted to, like my parents and my husband's parents, they just wanted to see her. They didn't care about COVID, and they're relatively, they're over 60, but they just wanted to see their grandkid. They didn't care about catching COVID.
yeah. It was
Rightly or
very
wrongly.
weird, very weird. I mean, I had it in it again with my mum. I was taking care of her at the time. She wasn't very well, but it was a case of I was basically not going into too much detail, but she was going through some treatment. I think we all know what that means. But it was a case of I was changing dressings, I was getting her breakfast, etc. But she wouldn't let me hug her because I was still working. She was terrified. We didn't want to hug each other because I was terrified that if I hugged her or breathed on her that I would make her worse. And thinking back, I'm thinking, you stupid woman. To myself, I would never call my mum that. Just to clarify, I was thinking, why on earth did I do that? If I wanted to hug my mum, I should have done it. It's a case of why on earth was I was in the same house as her. I was touching her, I was giving her dinner, but I had to wear a mask and gloves and not hug her. And I thought, what on earth even was that?
It's
It's
I
just
was
just
the toll it takes on the human spirit, I think, can't be underestimated, and especially on the
Yeah.
young who you only get a few years to be young. It's like not that
Yeah.
like your childhood and your adolescence is
Yeah.
only
So you just
you know
sparked a memory of in the test site we had a young boy come in, and he was only oh god, he must have been about 6-8 months. He was a COVID baby, putting it bluntly. He was a COVID baby, and he came in and he was constantly saying sanitizer, hand sanitizer. I just thought, oh, he's just been taught to use hand sanitizer. And the mum went, oh, that was his first word. And we all stood there.
Oh
Honestly, we all
God.
stood there and we did not know what to say, whether to be happy or disgusted. We were like, oh my God, are you serious? Like that hand sanitizer was this child's first word. And I thought that is going to take some toll on this child when he's older, realizing, you this is what you were brought up in. It's a very weird thing to sort of think back on.
I'm
Well,
seeing this in
I
the school that I'm working in, the year threes particularly. I mean, I was talking to the teacher saying, "What's going on with the year threes?" She said COVID, because they would have been at that age where I think they would have gone into reception during COVID,
Yeah.
and that's a really crucial time for their sort of development and being socialized with other children. And when I just after the pandemic, I got a part-time job working at a local NHS surgery for a few months, just doing school hours. And the amount of calls that we were getting from parents about their children's mental health. One woman said that her son had been scrubbing his hands so much that the skin was coming away from his hands, and stories like this. And I mean, now we've got this kind of weird ADHD thing going on. I don't know if you've been following this. It's just like everyone's got ADHD now,
Yeah.
apparently.
Yeah.
And but a lot of the stories I'm hearing is sort of going back to the lockdowns, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I just think the damage. I mean, we didn't put any of that on our daughter. We had a really happy lockdown, me and my husband, my daughter. He worked upstairs, I did the homeschooling. We told her minimum amount. She was 8. We just said, look, there's this thing, it could be really bad, but we're going to be fine, and the government had just been extra careful, and you're going to just stay with mum and dad for a while. And she was like, yay.
That's really nice to hear.
And we didn't have the news on, we didn't give her any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And she's fine. But she went back to school and she said, Mum, there were 3 children crying in my class today because they were scared and they didn't want to sit next to anybody. And that was when she went back to school.
I don't know if you agree with this, and I don't know if you've had this experience as well, Poe, having such a young one during the whole situation, but we noticed very much at the site that the parents were also traumatized. I mean, I had to walk out more than once, not because anybody made me angry, and I wasn't the only one, and it was usually the women who had to walk out, but because we had mums coming in with sick children or sick babies or toddlers, so quite young, and they're trying to shove a swab down their nose or up the, and they were screaming, crying. You know, they're sick anyway, they're very ill, they're tired, you know, they're in pain, etc. And then you've got these poor mums who are so stressed out, they're so tired, and they've been told that this is what they have to do in order to go out, to even just to go back to work, to go back to school. And this was sort of, you know, towards the end. And I just felt sorry for the mums because they were sat there in tears and we couldn't touch them. We weren't allowed to, you know, we couldn't just pat them on the shoulder and be like, it's okay, you know, we've got you, you know, we couldn't do that. We had to stand there and just try and talk. You know, that was the only thing we could do. We weren't allowed to be hands-on at all. And the one thing I remember that still traumatizes me to this day is the amount of mums who looked at me and they would just say, can you do it? I can't cope. And I still get choked up now because it was horrible, absolutely horrible. And I just thought, no parent should ever have to go through that. No parent should have to see their child in so much pain that they have to ask another woman to take over. And that was not okay. It was not okay.
That's heartbreaking.
No, we never did that. I never, you know, I'm not saying those mums were to blame. Obviously they were doing what they had to. We never did that. I didn't want to do it. I hated doing it to myself. I would never do that to my daughter.
I'm glad you didn't, because I felt sorry for both of them, and I just thought, you know, this doesn't have to happen. This doesn't have to be the case. And it was always the mums who came in that were pressured by either their work or by their peers to go and do it. It was never the ones who kind of came in by choice. They were pretty relaxed, to be honest. It was always the ones who were pushed to do it, and it was incredibly hard. And I had to walk out more than once, and you just hear a screaming child behind you. And I don't just mean, you know, screaming as in kicking off tantrum. I mean a child in pain and distress, and you've got the mum crying. And that was the worst days, you know, when that happened. It only took one out of the, you know, 200-300 people you saw. It only took one child to dampen. I mean, it was dark and, you know, horrible anyway, but to completely dampen the rest of the day. And
absolutely,
you know, it was horrendous, absolutely awful. And I only think now, you know, how are those mums getting on now is what I want to know. You know, are they okay, or are they now worried every time their child sneezes? You know, I'm now, you know, does it have the same effect on the children, you know, as it does with the parents, you know?
Yeah, it was a very dark time, and I just wanted to bring it up because the narrative after the vaccines got rolled out, the narrative very quickly shifted to an argument about the vaccines, and I really don't want to get into that here. It's just a minefield in terms of censorship, but because the conversation moved on so fast, I really want to just take a minute to come back to all of this, and everything you said here is really helpful, because I want to make sure no one watching this forgets to hold the people in charge at that time accountable. And when I saw Danny Kruger giving this speech that I was reading from at the start of the show, I realized this is what I want every politician to say. And obviously, like, words are cheap, right? But at least, this is the least they could do, is to say that it was a mistake and to say it's not going to happen again, or that we're going to learn from it next time this happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
say
totally agree.
I feel like you're trying to get into a new... Sorry.
No, go ahead, Edwards.
I was just going to say, in case we're about to jump onto a new topic, the one thing I find fascinating and terrifying from this whole period is the overreach that organizations now feel that they can have into their lives. So I've spoken before, I work kind of in the communications internal comms field. And now employers feel that they can sort of tell their employees kind of what things they need to put in their body, let's put it that way. And that never used to be, you know, apart from if you're working in a specific part of the world or you're at risk of a specific thing, it never used to be, from my experience, never used to be a kind of requirement or a conversation at work. Whereas now it's a
Yeah,
It's
I
a
see. I
demand.
completely agree, and I don't mind saying it. No one else has to bring this up. But in terms of the vaccines, very quickly, and on that point, with the two jobs I had, putting it bluntly, I needed the money. I couldn't be out of work. So furlough wasn't an option, and the two jobs I had didn't go to furlough anyway, and I carried on working. But if I wanted to keep those jobs, I had to have the vaccine. If I did not have it, I would have been fired, and I would have to move back in with my mum, putting it bluntly, which was ridiculous. I felt incredibly threatened, and this was also something that at the time was incredibly new. They just brought it out with the COVID site. We didn't even know what it was, and the first thing I always remember it very well. I went in with my colleagues, and the first thing they said to us, to the women specifically, as it is Women's Hour, they said just to the women, not to the men. And it was women between the ages of 21 and 30, and they said, "Are you planning on having any children within the next 5 years?" And the majority of us were saying yes. And we were told that this could have an impact on that, and we didn't know what that impact was. So even
you can't.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I can't risk getting another community strike.
We're not going any further. But that was what we were told. So that was that. So it was either lose your job or or get this. So yeah, I completely agree with you, Havenwoods, in terms of now your bosses can now basically say, oh, you have to have this. And like you say, that was never the case. It was never heard of. It just didn't happen. Nobody cared, if you had a flu vaccine or if you had your measles vaccine as a child. That's not something that ever came up in conversation. Which so that I think that just shows how much even in the workplace
But I also think that this intrusion, everything's been ramped up now in terms of, as you say, kind of getting into people's lives and into their heads almost. I feel like a bit like that at school. It's all working in the school. It's a little bit like the teachers are taking on this far more sort of, they're doing all this social emotional thing, and I think they feel like they have to. That's been ramped up since COVID, I'm sure of it. So they feel like they have to kind of get into the heads of the kids. And I mean, my daughter started this school and I started working there. We only moved to this area last summer, so she's new in year 6. And her teacher, who's lovely, sat her down the other week and went through all these questions. She came home and said, "Oh, Mum, the teacher asked me all these questions. How happy are you at school? How many friends do you have? What's your home life like? Are you happy with this? Are you happy with that?" And alarm bells went off, and I went and spoke to the teacher. She said, "Oh, we're doing that with all the kids now, and I just wanted to check in on Olivia now to see how she is." And she is fine. She's fine. She's absolutely fine. But that evening, my daughter was starting to get all kind of like nervous and worried about things where she'd been completely happy before.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, and they don't tell the parents. It's only because I worked in the school that I was able to catch the teacher.
I agree with you, Tasha, and I do think it is very much sort of, they are getting into your head. When I was working in the school, obviously we had safeguarding. But that was a case of, as each student, if you see them behaving differently, etc., that's when you bring up a question. And when I say a question, it's just, are you okay? That's it. You don't delve into a list of questions and start asking about their family life and home life, because I feel like it puts paranoia into the child. Like, oh, my school teacher wants to know absolutely everything I do, and it.
And then the kid starts thinking, oh, maybe there's something. I mean, I took her to I took her to a GP a couple of months ago for a stomach issue, and it wasn't much. She just had she'd had this bug, and she was bringing up a bit of food sometimes, and because they couldn't figure out what it was, the doctor asked whether I could leave the room to speak with my daughter, and I said, why? And they said, oh, well, because they wanted to do this whole social emotional stuff, and I said, I refused to leave.
Good for you.
And then the doctor got really funny with me and said, oh, well, this is standard. I said, well, no, she's still a child. And the doctor was saying, well, we have to rule out. And she said, okay, I'll ask the questions with you in the room. And then she started asking, oh, how's it at home? How many friends have you got? I said, what's this got to do with her stomach? Nothing.
Yeah, that's got absolutely nothing.
And it's really, I feel like it's kind of closing in sort of intrusion on
It is.
this emotional thing of your children when I've got a well-adjusted normal kid. I mean, I understand if there's a kid that's really obviously got some kind of issues and is really distressed, but she's not, you know. So they're just
Yeah.
doing this across the board, and I feel it is an intrusion. It's got actually not their business. What
Yeah,
how
it's an
happy
intrusion, and I feel like it's going to confuse them as well. You know, if you ask a child all these questions, they're going to start wondering, well, is there something wrong? Because everybody keeps asking me, and
Yes.
it's we know when somebody, the classic one is when, you know, you're just a bit tired and somebody keeps asking you, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And by the time they've asked it for the 10th time, you're suddenly pissed off. So now something's wrong. You know, when actually
Yes.
nothing's wrong to
Yes.
begin with, because somebody asked you so many times.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
I feel
kids
like
are
it's
so
like that.
susceptible to this. I mean, I'm a great believer in if you will yourself to believe that you're happy, you're likely to be happy. You know,
All
I
right.
just yeah.
We're
Anyway,
going to move
sorry.
on because we've got more topics tonight. Thanks for that. If you want to hear more about what we're talking about just now, you can listen to the episode with Tasha. Was it last week? A couple of weeks ago, I talked to Tasha.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
That was great. So yeah, we talked all about this child stuff and the medicalizing of children and all of that. It was great. So go ahead and listen to, I think it was Wham Hour number 53. And I've got we're doing celebrity news this week because
What has this turned into, Poe?
I saw this on Twitter, and I kind of it caught my brain thinking, as it does. So I'm just going to get into the news, and then I have a few things to say about it. I want to open it up for the girls, but the news, it's not even really news. It was just some people on Twitter that I saw complaining about Taylor Swift's boyfriend. So this BuzzFeed article sums it up, but it's really not made any headlines or anything. Taylor Swift is dating a musician, an English musician called Matty Healy. And he's like the son of some British actors. He was raised in London. He's truly English. And he the first thing I heard about this is that this guy was, let me just check my notes. He was being called racist, anti-Semitic, and misogynistic. And and Taylor Swift is, and Taylor Swift was is dating him, and she's still dating him despite all of her fans complaining that he's all these things. And it got me thinking about cancel culture. That by any metric, this is not a personal opinion. This is like objectively, Taylor Swift is one of the most famous women currently alive, and one of the most sort of desirable in terms of her status and also her beauty, her talent. She's a desirable woman, and if her fans tried to cancel this guy, and get her to dump him basically, and to publicly disavow him and everything he's ever said. But she just won't,
can I
right?
just butt in very quickly, Poe? All I can
Go.
think here is, because I will say it now, I'm not a massive fan of Taylor Swift, but but all I can think now is she does release a new album every time she breaks up with somebody. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of like, are the fans just doing this because they want a new album?
I think she's only just started releasing the songs from her most recent breakup with the. Why do I know this about her? So they were all like completely besotted with her relationship with Joe Alwyn because it was all like perfect and cute and lovely. And they've only, to be honest, my main question with that is like she only announced splitting up with Joe Alwyn. I know Gatsby, about 2 months ago, and she's already got someone new. It's like bloody hell.
Did you know she dated Tom Hiddleston in
Yes.
2016? I didn't know this.
I found that
I
very
did not
weird
know
because I
this.
think the age difference is actually probably not as big as I think it is. But in my head, like she's still a teenager and he's in his 40s. So
God,
Yeah.
is that
it's
him?
That guy.
I guess it's him. He's in a band called the 1975.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
right,
recognize him now.
she's got really bad taste in men.
Yeah,
I like
he's-
him. I'm not, whatever. I'm not I'm not taking a huge stand on it, but he's
I
fine.
just feel like which one's going to make the best album?
So I really don't want to spend too long on this, but I did see this video which I thought was funny. So this is what the anti-Semitism accusation was about. So he has a song that apparently, and it is. Come on, it's a song
Definitely.
called "Love It If We Made It," where one of the lyrics is "Thank you, Kanye, very cool," and while he was singing this on stage, he did the the Roman salute to say to call it its code
I mean,
name.
that's not even an accidental photo, is it? That's
No.
very
He was calling Trump a Nazi, right? Because "Thank you,
Wow.
Kanye, very cool" is a Trump quote, and
Mm-hmm.
now Kanye, of course, has also joined that. Has that accusation pinned to him.
Joined the
So
group.
he was doing, he's doing the salute to. Do not very subtly imply that these guys that he's singing about are Nazis, but even so, people are still mad that he did that he made this gesture
I
even
can
as
see
satire.
why this would be confused in terms of he's calling them a Nazi, but he's also doing the salute himself. I mean, the
So
Roman
it doesn't
salute,
matter. Like
obviously.
the context, context doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, they just don't care. They don't need
Classic
to know
stuff,
the
yeah.
facts. They're just like, oh well, I saw him doing that bad thing, so that means he's a bad man.
Yeah. So you can. This is what got to me. So obviously these accusations just won't stick because it's all it's all just stuff no one actually cares about. There's like we were just saying, like it's just 5 people on Twitter who are really upset about this, making a lot of noise, and one person like wrote a letter to Taylor Swift and signed it like from all your fans. It's like there's just one person wrote that.
Yeah.
But obviously, like cancel culture, it doesn't always work, right? Like people like have these attempts at canceling, and if the person is just famous enough and likable enough, like Taylor Swift is really squeaky clean in terms of her like public image. She really would never take a political stance about anything. So this stuff just doesn't. It just doesn't seem to bother her. Like it doesn't stick to her.
It
No one
depends
cares
how big you are as well. I mean, Adele, they tried to cancel
Yeah.
Adele, didn't they, at one point? But
for
she's
being
just,
too skinny.
yeah, for being
Yeah.
too skinny. But also, she did this Notting Hill Carnival thing where she dressed up in Jamaican flags and did her hair in cornrows or
Oh,
something.
for shame.
And so,
Imagine.
yeah, I know, and and so they went after her for that. But I think she's almost too loved because people grew up. I mean, I guess I didn't grow up with that, but some people grew up with Adele and Taylor Swift, and it's just part of their. They can't. She's not cancelable because she's too big, and I think Adele's the same. And I think Kanye will still sell albums, because people love their music. I think if their music was more crap and they were less popular.
I feel like it's a love-hate relationship because I mean, yeah, they have enough people who love them, and as you say, Tasha, they are to the point where they are mega stars now. But I almost think that there is enough people that hate them as well that they've just kind of given up. You hear something about Kanye West or Taylor Swift now, and most people just kind of go, okay. As you say, Poe, this wasn't on major news. You found it yourself. It was a sort of a backstory sort of thing. But I think it's got to the point where if the stars are so big and something like this comes out, people aren't overly concerned anymore because they are that big, and it's kind of, oh, okay, they've done this now, big whoop. Unless they do something spectacular.
I think things have changed in the last couple of years. I do think that the tide is turning a bit on this stuff. I think people are just getting a bit more desensitized now. If this had happened maybe in 2021 or 2020, it might have been a bit different. I don't know.
Well, that brings me to my next topic, which is a successful cancellation which happened this week. You guys know the story, Philip Schofield?
No, I've seen things, but I just ignore it because it's him and I don't care.
I know.
Yeah,
it was only because of the Taylor Swift thing I wanted to bring this up as well, because this is at the same time we've got a similar phenomenon of in reverse. We've got something that Philip Schofield, a gay man, on TV. He's quite well liked. He's very famous, but he's been fired from ITV because of an affair he had with a much younger but legal young man while he was still married.
But
so
legal.
He was it wasn't. He did nothing illegal. Let's just make that perfectly
It's
clear.
the fact they had to put that in there that kind of annoys me because I mean, let's be fair here. Philip Schofield isn't exactly a spring chicken, but it's when they say, "Oh, much younger," but then have to put "but legal young man." If you just say much younger,
his brother's recently been convicted of dalliances with illegal. I'm trying to find a YouTube-friendly way to put it.
No, yeah, I know what you mean. Yes, his brother has had the same offence, but the illegal version of it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, it's a very I'm going to sound so problematic, but it's a very common thing in a lot of gay male relationships to have
yes,
quite
Yeah, it is.
alarming age differences. Like Stephen Fry's husband is
Mm.
40, 35, 40 years younger than him.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
It's
very
a
quite
case of
common.
when there's quite a lot of relationships where they are quite literally old enough to be their dad, and it's
Or older.
or older. Yeah. But it is common. I don't think it's a problematic thing to say, because it is a fact. It is very common, and
Well, I think-
especially in celebrity gay couples, I think.
But also, I think in the gay community, I think there is a thing where older guys will take younger guys under their wing, as it were.
It's called pederasty.
Is that what it's called? Okay. And sort of teach them the ways.
Take that as you will.
Yeah.
I think the famous guys they can get away with it because they're famous, and lots of people are probably getting in touch with them with this exact kind of relationship in mind. They just take the pick, basically.
Yeah.
I didn't want to spend too long on this, but it's interesting to me analysing these cases of what exactly can get you cancelled and what doesn't get you cancelled. Like, what are the differences here? Is it because he's male?
I don't know if anybody knows this, but obviously he got cancelled for dating this younger employee. Nothing illegal, as we've seen. So why was it an issue?
He lied about it. Apparently, that was the big deal. Like he wasn't upfront about it.
I feel like that's playground nonsense. You know, if you think, oh, I'm not actually going out with that guy, it is very much playground talk.
Well, you remember he only came out as gay a few years ago. Like this affair happened when he was in the closet, as they say.
But it was his wife I was thinking about, really.
Yes.
Because, I mean, imagine that. Gosh.
I think she probably knew, to be honest.
I think she probably knew. But I was thinking, you've been married for, what was it, 20 odd years, and then you suddenly come out as gay. I was like, it's not sudden, is it?
If you, this is going to sound, this isn't going to sound right, but if you're married to a celebrity, it's not the same as like a typical marriage. Like you have to, you're married to someone who's incredibly wealthy, and you're part of their public image. So even if your marriage is on the rocks, even if there's an affair, there's a certain amount of sweep it under the carpet and put on a smile for the cameras going on that just doesn't happen in most marriages.
There's a lot of it's a front sort of attitude going on. There'll be one face in front of the camera, behind the scenes there's a completely different story going on that we don't always know about. And in this case, we found out, not that long ago that, Philip Schofield was actually gay, when I think a lot of people did have thoughts on this. I
remember when he came out, though, him and that Holly Willoughby. Did you watch the speech where they did this whole...
No, I got fed up
with it. And it was awful.
Yeah, it was you're so brave, and I just thought.
And he had tears in his eyes, and so did she. And
he's not brave. He'd have been brave if he'd come out in 2005
Yeah,
They're coming out in like late, like nearly 2020. It's just
even
absolutely.
I don't think, to be honest.
I feel like now it's a case if you come out as gay and somebody calls you brave, I will tell them to get a grip, because now if you come out as gay, I'm like, okay, cool.
No, coming out straight is brave now.
Yeah, coming out. I'm sorry, I'm a straight woman in a relationship.
There's a Stone Thomas. There's a Stone Toss comic about this, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to say it. Okay, that's enough of that. I've got some. I've got another surprise topic for you, which is it's a really fresh take based on a conversation I had on Twitter earlier that I wanted to bring to all of you ladies. Let's just try and find it. So you'll remember Philosophy Cat or Philosophicat, I think is how you say it, from Wham in Hour a few months ago, like last year, when Birdie was hosting and I was on maternity leave. We had Philosophicat on to talk about astrology. Now I know there's a lot of people in the audience who are not on board with astrology, and that's fine. Forget I said it. But I got involved in a thread that she was posting in because I follow her. I follow pretty much every woman on Twitter who's even mildly right wing or based. So this is all sparked by some post with we're not going to talk about obesity because we had it as a topic a few weeks ago, and then we talked about we've talked about that kind of thing a few times, but she had a she was talking about this kind of Let me just read it because I want to get into the whole thing. Beauty and health do matter, but I don't believe there is only one way to be beautiful or healthy, and I don't believe in promoting vanity. Women need to look in the mirror less, not more. I want young women to understand that just because their particular body type doesn't fit the fashion trends of the day, that they are still okay just the way they are. I don't want women to go through life hating themselves because no matter how much they diet and exercise, they will never look like an airbrushed model. I don't want women to hate their bodies just because they've had a baby or gone through menopause. That's a miserable way to live. As women, our bodies change constantly throughout our lives, and we need to be okay with that. We shouldn't be so vain that we care about things like having a perfectly flat tummy, or that we worry about a bit of cellulite or whatever. Aim for a healthy, functional body and don't worry about the imperfections. Take the energy you would have spent worrying about whether you were pretty enough and put it towards something productive and fulfilling. Let me just continue. It's kind of a thread. A lot of young women waste their youth by thinking that if they lost only a bit more weight, they'd finally be happy. I remember thinking that too before life gave me a reality check. But it never ends. Once you get into the mindset of rejecting your body, it doesn't matter how much you weigh or how pretty you are. You'll still always feel like it's not good enough. You'll still always hate what you see in the mirror. In every single one of these photos, I hated the way I looked at the time. I thought I was fat and ugly. I wasn't, of course, but my own warped self-image, thanks in part to the glorification of anorexic body types when I was growing up, prevented me from ever being able to enjoy being in my own skin. Why would I want any other woman to suffer with that affliction? So this is just for context. These are the pictures that made her feel fat and ugly when she's, objectively, I think, a very beautiful woman with a healthy body. This is not unhealthily overweight, and it's, there's plenty of guys out there, maybe a lot of guys watching this, who would, find this attractive. That's I think you'd be weird if you didn't, to be honest.
I think it's a human. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Tasha. Can I just make one comment? Now, I do like Philosophicat. We do get on. I do agree with a lot she has to say. However, the one thing I picked up on there was when she's, I think it was the first paragraph, where she said, "I don't agree on promoting vanity." And it's either she's written it in a way where she shouldn't have put that paragraph first, because obviously it's the first thing you see or read, and then it's a bunch of photos of herself. So I don't know whether that comes across, quite bad. And I don't know whether she's just worded this a little bit wrong in some ways, because the other bit I picked up on was, case in point, in every single one of these photos, I hated the way I looked at the time. I thought I was fat and ugly. And then saying I wasn't, of course, Now, I'm not saying she's doing this at all. Just clarification, not saying she is doing this. However, I have seen a lot of women post things like this, and the classic one, I'm sure we've all seen a woman do this at some point, going, "Oh, I look really fat in this," and they post a photo, and then loads of people comment going, "No, you don't, you look really great." That's the view I'm getting from this. If I didn't have the time or patience to read through this whole thread, my initial jump would have jumped to those two things, because I'm lazy and I don't read massive threads. So I'm just hoping that the comments are nice and they don't do what I do and jump to the bad points. Because
but isn't that what women are like? That's what we're like. And I think
this is the problem, Tasha. That's what we're like.
That's what we're like. And you know, I mean, I'm going through menopause now, which I'm not. That's a whole other stream. But what I will say is, look, I was attractive when I was in my late teens, early 20s. I can say that now, but I didn't think it then. But that was the thing. I kind of thought it, but I didn't think it, and I was always to-ing and fro-ing, and maybe I'm too fat and maybe I'm not, but I was always getting lots of attention from men. So I thought, well, mate, I must be, and I think that's kind of what it is to be a woman. We're all a bit like that.
Sort of covered this. It was I can't remember what the stream's called now, which is terrible. But it's one that we did on Women's Hour, and it very much covered the points of women are very much. You look in a mirror and the first thing you do is judge yourself. You know,
Yes.
the first
Yeah.
thing you do is, oh, that's wrong, or this is out of place. And I completely agree with you, Tasha. You know, I go back 10 years and I think, oh God, what on earth was I doing? And I, at the time, I was like, oh, I was, you know, I'm nice and skinny, and you know, I'm really thin, and I was actually underweight. I was I was actually ill, and I don't mind saying that now, because I look back and thinking, yeah, that was not okay. Now I'm not the skinniest of women. I'll say that now. I have some curves. I don't mind, because that is my body shape. You know, that's
think-
that is my body shape. But I mean,
I
2 years
think
ago, I had a bit of a moment, as us women do, when, as we all know, I think we're all similar sort of ages anyway, or at least have been through this. A woman gets to a certain age and her body changes, and what the way I say it is, it settles into itself, and that is your body. You know, that's it. That's your body. You can try and change it as much as you like, but at the end of the day, that's your body, and that's what you need to be comfortable in. But as Philosopher Cat was saying, you know, your body changes a silly amount as a woman, and again, we covered on Women's Hour. Women, as in a way, brought up to look at magazines, the media, other women, and think, oh well, you know, she's getting the attention, I need to look like her, or that magazine, she's in a magazine.
Is that, I mean, that we can put that down to modernity, and then now we've got all the sort of Botox. I mean, I worked with a bunch of 20-year-olds quite recently in that NHS place I worked at, and they were all doing Botox.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, I was really shocked, and they were talking about it, and I was in the sort of room, and I felt like, should I? And I said, hang on a minute, are you all? And they were like, oh yeah, and I was like, why? And she said, oh, you should have seen my face before. And I could not believe that these 20-somethings were all doing Botox. And that is scary, because that wasn't happening when I was in my 20s.
Well, I think we find it scary because I do unfortunately think it's a sign of the times, because, I mean, I've said it before, you know, as a 14-year-old, you're wearing butterfly clips and sticky lip gloss that your hair gets stuck to. And I mean, even today, I mean, incredibly based, I was driving a steamroller through town with Alex, and we saw a couple of girls wearing...
steamroller?
Yeah, as you do. You know, that's my normal Friday afternoon pleasure. And we saw a couple of girls who were in crop tops and very short shorts. I mean, yes, it was a hot day out. However, these girls, even by looking at their physiques, putting it bluntly, because they had everything on show, they could not have been older than 14. And I thought, Christ, if I had even tried to wear that, you know, when I was that age, I would have been shunned. You know, I would have had people yelling, you know, shame as I walked down the street.
I don't want to get sidetracked by stick waving, because I did have I had a wider point here. We're having an efficient stream.
But I think from what she's saying, I think everything she's saying, I'm thinking, yeah, duh. I'm not being horrible.
Yeah.
But obviously we all do that. But I don't think we can take that. I think women, even before modernity, I mean, I think that's what, even maybe hundreds of years ago, maybe women were comparing themselves to the other women in the village.
Yeah, but that was my point. Okay, so that when you live in before photography, the only women you're comparing yourselves to are like the 200 women in your village, most of whom are either old or like children. So like the hottest person you've ever met is probably today would be considered like mid, right? So you've only met like 400 people in your whole life. Like, I'm talking about like really far, you know, pre-modern era, like pre-industrial, like pre-civilization. Like our brains are wired not for this world, but for like a hunter-gatherer society where we spent most of our evolution as humans, where you would only meet about 200 people in your whole life. Yeah, and the way that we compare ourselves to other people, and we sort of make these hierarchies in our mind. Like if you think about the highest ranking person in your village today, in the modern society might be like a really successful project manager at a local company. Like the equivalent like quality of person just does not they're not going to be Elon Musk or Adele, right? They're just going to be you could rise to like the highest peak of your tiny tribe or village by being what is today considered a pretty average, like above average person.
But we were still comparing, though. I think we would have still been
Yes,
looking
but
in the mirror.
but the thing
and
that
saying,
you're
"Oh, we're
comparing
not-"
yourself to is
Yeah.
much, much closer. Is the thing?
Yes,
It's like
yes,
you're
yeah.
the thing is that our brains aren't really adapted even to have mirrors or
Yeah.
like let alone photography. Like
I
having
do think
go on.
that, you know, even as you say, if you're comparing yourself to, let's say you've got a village of 20 people, and 10 of which are women, I do think, you know, as we were saying, you're still going to compare yourself to those other women because one of them is going to be, to your eye, more attractive than another. So even if you couldn't see yourself, you think, oh, well, she's really attractive, I want to be like her.
And they're
But
competitors.
to put this
They're
in context, we're
competing.
talking about comparing yourself to these 6 women all lined up like this in like an underwear
And
ad from
we all
10
compare
years ago or
ourselves
something.
to other women all the time, and that I think that is just completely inbuilt because we would have been looking around to see what the competition was and looking at
Yeah.
the men and thinking, well, who's going to be going with who, and who am I up against here?
I
Because
think, I think it does go back to dare I say, the Chad concept of, you know, you have the man who believes he's a 10. You know, he wants to be better than the other men. He wants to be the top dog. You know, I think women do the same. You know, we basically
Yes.
we cluck. That's what, you know, like hens do. Haven's has just gone, but
have
they
you had
always
women
have.
be jealous of? I mean, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I think this was quite a normal thing. I used to not realise it, but I had women being really nasty and horrible because they were actually jealous. It's only now looking back, I think, oh God, they were jealous, weren't they? I didn't know at the time. I just thought, well, what's wrong with them? But it's that's what women do.
Yeah.
That's kind of my point, though, is that the coming back to the whole, the underwear model thing, which is what sparked this whole conversation. It's that even like seeing other people naked is a quite modern thing, like especially photographs. Even after the invention of photography, it took a few decades before we were actually seeing. But yeah, it was like in olden days, a glimpse of stocking was something shocking. But now heaven knows anything goes. So the point is that it's like all you can see. Like everywhere you go, advertising, you can just see like extremely attractive naked people. And your first thought about your own body is not, am I healthy? Like, does my husband find this attractive? It's, does my husband find this attractive compared to that 10-foot billboard of a really hot lady? And I'm not talking about censorship here or saying like this must be illegal necessarily, but I do find this way of thinking about things really helpful to put things in perspective. Like the hunter-gatherer's guide to the 21st century is a book by Brett Weinstein and Heather.
Yeah.
His wife Heather.
I've started that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have a podcast where they talk about this sort of stuff, and I always find it really helpful to just put yourself in the mindset of like, what would a caveman, hunter-gatherer, whatever, cave woman, what would someone like that think of? How would that person adapt to this environment? Because that's what you are. Your brain is adapted for that environment, and you've been dragged into the modern world where we have extremely attractive people on our on our phones, on our screens, in posters that you literally can't avoid looking at because they're in public. You can't just avoid
this stuff. And in evolutionary terms, the last 100 years is like a minute.
Yes, exactly.
So we haven't updated our systems. We're still running on the same like hardware, whatever, as we were sort of thousands of years ago or whatever. Yeah. So but I would just like to say that when you get to my age, you don't care anymore. I don't care about.
That's
I just
what I
don't
wanted to say
care.
too.
I just really don't care anymore about this stuff.
I think what Philosophicat was sort of hitting on, I think Birdie as well, and I feel it as well, is that now that you're kind of past that stage, it feels so stupid that we hated ourselves back then. That we thought we were fat and ugly because we were comparing ourselves to women who were absolutely unattainably, like women who have won the genetic lottery.
Yes.
Like, I've never been obese in my whole life.
Yeah,
I've always been healthy, but I hated myself.
Youth is wasted on the young. I mean,
I was just going to say, actually, Tasha, that as you said, Poe, that we spent our youth comparing ourselves to other women. other women. We were teenagers, we were girls, we weren't women. So now, yes, we do compare ourselves to other women, but it's not necessarily as what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as intense as it was when we were younger. I mean, yeah, of course, like you say, you walk through a street and you see a billboard, and now you might go, oh yeah, she looks nice. But that's it. I'm not going to go, oh no, now I have to lose weight to look like her.
You know what it is,
To me,
Bernie?
they look like they might. I think about my daughter now. So I'm at the age now where when I see young beautiful women, I'm thinking purely in terms they're closer to my daughter's age than they are to my age. So, and my thing with other women now is just, are they sound? Are they, it's what's going on in the head. I
Yeah.
don't care. I mean, when I look at young, attractive women, I think, oh, good for them, and I just think about the world my daughter's going into. I don't think in terms. I sort of
Yeah.
stopped. I think when I got to about 40, that's when I just sort of dropped all that stuff really, and I changed from being a kind of potential sort of like, oh, they look better than me, to being a kind of mother figure almost. You look at them more like,
Yeah.
oh, like they're like
I'll
kids,
tell you what. I'll tell you what it was for me, and it wasn't just sort of growing past puberty, which obviously helped, but also just getting married and really pinning down
Yeah.
a man who
I was just gonna.
who I love,
mention,
who I
Yeah.
know is in love with me and attracted to me, and as
Yes.
long as I don't let myself go too much, I know he's going to continue being attracted to
Yeah.
me. That's just
I've kind
like
of noticed this.
such a weight off my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to touch on that. It's perfect timing, Poe. I was going to mention, so in comparison to sort of yourself, myself, Poe, and my friend, there's two different kinds of ways we kind of look at ourselves. So now, the only person I want to look good for and take care of myself for is obviously myself and my other half. So Alex, that's it. I don't care what other men think, because I'm not trying to impress them. I've got man, I know he's in love with me.
Yes.
That's fine. My friend, however, is as lovely as she is. She's got a fiance, but she's still very much, I mean, she's the same age as me, and it's quite funny how different we view things. And she's still very much she's jealous of other women type. And I mean, she is what I would consider to be stunning. I mean, I grew up with her, and she's always been one of these very naturally beautiful women. And she's never seen it. Well, I don't think she sees it, but she is incredibly jealous, around other women, which I find, I mean, she's not jealous around me because I just tell her straight, which is quite funny. But I just find it very odd in terms of the way I think about myself, in terms of, as you just said, Poe, I've got my fiance now, I'm not I don't care what I look like in terms of other men. I don't want to be in their eye line, or other women, I don't care what they think of me, because, their opinion now doesn't matter. Whereas my friend, if she sees another woman look at her, she instantly thinks, oh, well, she looks better than me, or is she trying to get my other half? And there's very much a different attitude.
But you
there.
said fiance, yeah. I mean, but I also think, because as much as I wasn't particularly happy with myself when I was in my 20s, I still didn't have that big jealous streak thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I think some women have it more than others, and
oh yeah, definitely.
I didn't. I was with a massive sort of social group, and we were going out all the time to parties. This was back in the 90s, and I didn't feel. I didn't have that kind of. I didn't mind. Like, I didn't look at other women and feel like I wanted to be them, or they were better than me, or things. I didn't look at women in that way, really. The only time where things would hit on me is if I had a boyfriend and he'd start looking at other women all the time. Those kind of years where that's all happening. But with my, obviously with my husband, I didn't have any. That all went, and I didn't have any of that anymore. That insecurity, because he wasn't the kind of guy. That I think there's that as well, because we've been together now for 24 years, and it was very obvious from the start that it was me. I was the one that he, and he was the one, and that I felt secure in that, because I knew he wasn't the kind of guy to go off and,
absolutely, yeah.
And I think that changes things, and he was just I just knew so clearly that he was, he might look at someone and find them attractive, but I knew there was no danger of him running off with someone else.
Yeah, Yeah,
you
definitely.
know, because I knew I was
completely
the
agree
one
with
for
you.
him, and that makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly. I completely agree with you, Aunt Tasha. I'm completely the same with Alex. I've got two sort of very brief questions for you both. In terms of with the whole jealousy, as we know, some women are definitely worse than others. So the first part is, well, I've seen it, but I don't know if you both agree. But do you find that it's always what we consider to be the better looking women or the hotter women to be
Yes.
the jealous ones?
Yes.
Yeah,
I think women
why?
know what they're valued for, or they value themselves in a certain way. So that
Yeah.
I would never. I don't get jealous of hot women, but if there's like a woman or even a man, I can get quite defensive about being seen as stupid or being seen as stupider as someone else because being
Yes.
Yes.
intelligent has always been that's the thing I'm proud of most. And I'm not like
Yeah.
the smartest person in the world, but
Yeah.
that's what I value in
think-
myself. So being compared to other women in that way makes me feel very
I
self-conscious
think
sometimes.
it also depends because for me, when I was at school, I was really bullied, and I was always told by other kids that I was ugly. And I don't think I was. It's just that was a way of bullying me. So I went through secondary school not having a boyfriend, not having any boys interested in me or anything like that. And I just assumed that, oh, that's because, well, that's all right, I'm ugly. So I always relied on my personality and always had a lot of like friends who were men, boys as well. Like I got on well with a lot of boys
Yeah.
as well as girls, and I always thought, well, I've got my personality, so that's what's going to sort of push me through. Like maybe Poe with your intelligence, I felt like I had the humor and I had, I was able to get on with people. I was very friendly, and that was the thing. And it was only when I got into I was a late bloomer, if you like. But I still didn't regard myself in that way. I always thought my personality was more important, and I didn't want to be objectified by men. I wanted men to like me for who I was as a person. I was that kind, you know what I mean? I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Don't you want to talk to me?
Yeah, no, I can
so-
completely relate.
So
My
that was the
sister
thing that was
the
more
same.
important. To be objectified just for the sake of that used to just
Yeah,
do my head in a bit. I was always much more interested in forming more sort of psychological relationships with men first, rather than just being seen as purely as a sexual object. Whereas I know women who are quite happy to be seen as a sexual object first. And I think that's a different mindset as well.
All right,
yeah,
we've
definitely.
been going for a lot more than an hour now. There was just one more thing I wanted to show that I thought was hilarious this week. I don't know if the audio is going to work. But did you have one more thing to say before I play this?
It'll probably go on for too long, and I to be fair, Tasha kind of wrapped it up pretty well there, so we're all good. I
Good.
completely agree with what she said.
All right,
So
we
let's
all
move
agree
on.
with Tasha and with Birdie. This is like, this like is almost news because you, as everyone will know,
What's Hitler doing there?
Ron DeSantis has announced his candidacy on Twitter Spaces with Elon, which is kind of a news in and of itself, like the meta news of people announcing their candidacy on Twitter now. Like that's like it's become an official political platform people to post on. But then Donald Trump parodied. Well, I don't think he made this. Some excellent shit poster has made this, and Donald Trump like posted it to his Instagram, which makes it all the funnier. So I'm going to try and play it. You tell me if you can hear this, okay?
Hi, everyone.
Yes.
Welcome to our Ron DeSantis Twitter space.
Hello? Is my microphone working correctly?
George, can you just wait while we...
Hello? Can you hear me?
We can all hear you, George. Can you just hold on for a second?
Hilfa, I don't think they can hear me.
I can hear you fine, George. Just speak to the
I don't think George
microphone.
knows how to use Twitter.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Can I please make my big announcement now? Everyone just...
Hello?
Just shut up, George.
Can somebody just mute George?
Dick, could you try not to cough on the...
Okay, so how are we going to take out Trump, you guys?
Guys from the FBI, this is not a private call. This is a public Twitter space. Everyone can listen.
I should just mention this. This is my third time watching this now, and it's still hilarious. Like I love it. Like start to end, it's perfect.
And
God damn it.
anyway, guys, we invited everyone to this Twitter space so Governor Ron DeSantis could...
Everyone just shut the hell up so I can make my announcement, okay?
You go, girl.
Wait, the devil is gay?
So what? Everyone in this call is gay. I happen to know every single one of you has a secret gay lover hidden in your closet.
Führer, ich kann nicht zulassen, dass die Soldaten, die für Sie
Guys, can we please just calm down?
So anyway, guys, I just wanted to announce that I'm.
Okay, I can hear the governor very well.
Shut up.
Would you please shut up already? I'm running for fucking president, okay?
Yeah, we kind of already
We
knew about
already
it.
know, governor.
Congratulations, Governor.
Well, that concludes our Twitter space for today. Thank you to all of our.
Hold your horses, Elon. The real president is going to say a few words. The devil, I'm going to kick your ass very soon. Hitler, you're already dead. Dick Cheney sounds like you'll be joining Hitler very soon. Klaus Schwab and George Soros, I'm putting both your asses in jail. And Ron DeSanctimonious can kiss my big, beautiful 2024 presidential ass. Trump 2024, baby. Let's go.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, so those who don't, those who might have been born yesterday, this is like I believe these voices are either edited or they're AI generated from the voices. So it's in some ways it'll be interesting to see how much we see of this like AI generated voice and also images to like of actual real people saying things that they could conceivably have said. Especially in the coming election, there's going to be a lot of accusations, I think, of like this is fake, like this is AI, or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought that was hilarious, and wanted to share it. We have got some super chats. If I,
Somewhere.
on earth, okay, we've had a very good show in terms of super chats. Thank you so much for everyone who donated. I'm just going start to end. From DRT is King, we have. A suggestion that calls back to the old internet wars and the uglification of characters. What is the right-wing women's opinion on female character design in the year of our Lord AD 2023? Have a good show, girls. I really appreciate the dedicated using as many characters as possible to ask this question. Because he's left $50, which I think is great. And he's left like $50 worth of words on this question, which I also love. Thanks so much, DRT, for that super chat. I did check; we don't have any outstanding super chats from last week, so it's this will be the topic for next week. From Sergeant Hoddle for $69, nice. Not simping. This is a bribery attempt to get a sundress mafia. Who would you twerk or something version of AA's Who Would You Do?
Oh no!
Well,
dear. Oh dear.
People who follow me on Twitter might know that I every time AA does a Who Would You Do tournament, I get so sick of seeing it in my feed that I mute AA for like a week after for the entire duration. It's just a waste of time. But I did have an idea for...
Women don't think like that though. You know.
No, I will call all the men out on this, and I think we've all seen it. The two photos that are up, one is clearly more revealing than the other. It's completely rigged.
It's all part of the game. He knows. Everyone knows what's going on.
Oh yeah,
he knows what he's doing.
That's why it's nonsense.
So my idea for Who Would You Do was Who Would You Wed, where we just do we just do a stream. We do the same thing, but we've got like Tom Hiddleston versus Ryan Gosling, basically. Or I wanted to do it with like online personalities, like you'd have like Ben Shapiro or Nick Fuentes.
There's a lot more thought into that, because Who Would You Do? It's just like, oh yeah, I'd do that one, but Who Would You Wed? I mean, that's a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
You
personality, qualities, like
Nick Fuentes, though. Oh my god, no!
Do I want this man to be the father of my children? That's the deep question we're asking on Who Would You Wed. So if Sergeant Hoddle is satisfied with that, and he doesn't want the sundress mafia version, whatever that is, Who Would You Twerk? I don't want to do Who Would You Twerk, but he did pay for it. So
he's twerking on this show.
So thank you very much for the super chat. If you want to leave a comment specifying if Who Would You Wed would be an acceptable compromise.
That would be interesting, I think.
It would be interesting.
I meant for Sergeant Hoddle because he paid the money, so he gets to decide. From Alice Liddell, I always got that wrong. Alice Liddell for £5. Thank you very much. Soldiers had to take what they were given at Porton Down. Horrific topic. If you don't know, servicemen exposed to Christmas Island nuclear tests. Yeah. That's basically what we were saying about the mandates we were talking about earlier. It's actually not completely unprecedented. Historically, people have been forced into taking medical procedures and even vaccines that they, in order, like they actually had to do it. It wasn't like you lose your job or this. It's just like this or you'll be court-martialed.
Yeah.
From DRT for $20. This is an expensive stream for DRT. This is an episode that should have had Aidan Paladin. More bribes to the topic of okay, he's trying to win out over who would you wed. And for another $2, and women are terrible judges of what is hot for dudes. What does that mean? Oh, I see. So women are terrible at judging what men find hot.
Yes, that is true. That
true.
is very accurate.
Because I couldn't believe that Debbie Harry didn't make it in the Who Would You Do thing. And to me, she's absolutely stunning.
No, we are not. We are discussing that tournament on the stream. It's banned.
That was my bugbear. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
But that is a true comment from DRT.
Well, it does come back to what we were saying earlier about women judging themselves, where you're kind of... I think when people judge themselves in the mirror, they're kind of taking on all sorts of different personas. Like, what would this person think of me? Like, what would my mother think of me? What would my... like, what would this kind of guy think of this? Or, like, what would that... Like, this guy that I like, how is he going to see me?
It's the whole lip filler thing that I will never get behind because of the. Do you ladies know the true story behind the lip fillers and why they were actually?
I know they look bad, but people still get them, so they must think it looks good.
So we are past the watershed, aren't we? What time is it? Yeah, okay. Just to cover. So the lip fillers were first invented for, what's the nicest way of saying it? Ladies of the night, to make themselves look more appealing for blowjobs, basically, and now it's a case of if I see a woman with a lip job, and I can just think you don't know what you're doing. You clearly, because it has just carried on throughout history and it's become a trend, unfortunately. But the original reason behind as to why women used to get lip fillers, I find hilarious. So now it's a case of okay, you're just trying to make yourself look more appealing to a man for that specific reason. Whereas I've not to this day, I mean, I'll probably get some comments now, but I've not to this day met a man who has found that attractive.
No, but do men? Yeah, I mean, but they do like, but men do like fuller lips. They tend to like fuller lips, I think.
Is that obviously fuller though? Because I mean, I feel like lip fillers are obviously I've not seen lip fillers that look natural.
Well,
I mean,
my husband just complains about them all the time. He said, "I saw a woman with these lip things." He said, "Why do they do that with their lips? It's so horrible." You know, I mean, it's so weird.
The thing is, if it did look natural, you wouldn't be able to tell that it had been done. So it's what they call a toupee fallacy, where you don't know the ones that are getting away with it because you don't detect. You're not even thinking about it when you look at them.
This is very true.
But women have like those really. I don't know if I'm offending any of the panelists or anyone watching, but women get like really long nails done, and they spend loads of money on expensive earrings.
No,
I don't think men.
Oh, it's horrible.
I don't think men like that at all.
I was in a shop the other day, and this lady dropped all her coins on the floor, and she couldn't pick them up because she said, "Oh, I just got a nail job," and I went over to help her because I've got short nails, and I was thinking, why? How do you go to the toilet?
Yeah, exactly. The one thing I cannot stand is women with these long fake nails. And I mean, I use a nail brush daily because of I'm as we said earlier on steam engines or in the garden. I've got very short nails for that exact reason. But with long nails, I'm thinking, how do you keep them clean? If you have long nails, I get really grossed out because I'm thinking, how do you clean them? That's just not practical.
It's not hygienic. It's disgusting. I mean, obviously cooking, but also like going when you go to the toilet. I mean,
all right, that's enough. We've had an hour and a half, which is like one of the longest. It's like one of the longest ramen hours ever.
How do they do that?
We've got too many topics tonight. We've gone too long. We've got to stop it. Have a good weekend, everyone. It's over. There's no more super chats. That's it. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Get out.
Bye.